She stared right into that producer's face and said it with her chest, flat, final, no wobble in her voice. "If Amy's gonna be filming, I'm not doing it." That wasn't a suggestion. It was a line drawn in concrete. And just like that, Tammy Slaton, TLC's most explosive and unpredictable wildcard, pulled the plug on her own show's entire balance. With one sentence, she didn't just threaten to walk off set. She fractured the very storyline the network had been orbiting around for 7 whole seasons. Behind the scenes, the silence was immediate, not dramatic, not chaotic, just a heavy, hollow stillness, like everyone knew that line couldn't be unsaid. Because for Tammy to say that, out loud, means emotionally, they were already long past the point of no return. And that moment wasn't leaked through backdoor rumors or unverified TikToks. That came from direct internal chatter. Producers froze. Because as much as viewers have been hooked on Tammy's no-filter persona, her relationship with Amy was, whether they were laughing or screaming at each other, the emotional anchor of the entire show. You could throw in as many cousins, new babies, or sugar-free family dinners as you want, but if Amy and Tammy weren't speaking, the whole foundation cracked. Tammy's threat wasn't blonde wig petty or mid-season drama meant to bump ratings. She wasn't bluffing to boost her own arc. She said it, and meant it, as a non-negotiable. TLC now had a decision to make: rebuild this show without the Slaton sisters side by side or risk losing the entire franchise just to honor an ultimatum. And that's when Amy, allegedly, snapped. No Instagram posts, no matching TikTok rants, just a quiet, sharp reaction in private that cut deeper than anything we've seen on camera. According to someone close to post-production, Amy said off camera, "Then the sister bond is over. Like, done." And maybe that's what made it worse. No fight, no back and forth, no real climax, because people don't realize this. Most relationships don't explode like in movies. They just end in silence, especially when you've already fought too much to bother shouting one more time. During filming, it was already getting tense. They weren't filming as many joint confessionals anymore. Production had to schedule B-roll around their silences. There were entire days where they didn't even exchange glances between shots. One crew member allegedly called it the coldest house in Kentucky. From a network point of view, it was a logistical nightmare. The two people viewers watched risk their lives together, cry in clinics, cheer each other on through surgery, scream at each other through burger wrappers, were now communicating only through producers. If that, how do you build tension when the actual bond evaporated? The production team tried a dozen save attempts. "Let's have them cook together again. Remember season 2? Rejected. How about a counseling visit with all 3 siblings? Blocked. Maybe a nostalgic drive down where they filmed their YouTube videos. Tammy wouldn't get in the car. It was pretty warped, because nobody knew exactly what set it off. There wasn't some huge on-camera betrayal. No major insult. No physical fight. Just a slow, cold decline. And maybe that's what makes it harder to understand. Because people wanted a smoking gun. But sometimes the trigger is quiet. It's years of resentment, unsaid stuff, and private stings that never heal. Amy's side, if you look at her subtle online behavior, seemed to be drifting for a while. Old pictures of Tammy were archived. Birthday posts disappeared. Family updates were strictly about her boys. And when fans asked whether Tammy would be at Gage's party, the hearts and smiley replies stopped coming. No emojis, just quiet. Tammy, meanwhile, started posting cryptic captions. Sometimes the loudest ones go silent to find peace. Another one that said, "Blood is thicker than water, but some blood clots." Comment sections blew up. Fans debated over who the quote was for. But those close to production weren't debating. They knew the sisters weren't speaking. At all. And that was a dangerous place for the show to be. Because here's the quiet truth behind every reality show: real relationships change the stakes. It's not acting. It's not improv. These women are exhausting themselves, week after week, exposing their rawest wounds on camera. And when one of those wounds stops healing, it starts to infect everything. The choice Tammy made was bold, cold, and completely in character. She's always defended her autonomy. She's always fought back, especially when she feels disrespected. But what nobody expected was that she'd aim that cannon at Amy. On the surface, it looks petty. Jealousy, competition, ego, but under it, possibly something deeper. Resentment that Amy moved on, had kids, got a life, became the sentimental fan favorite. Meanwhile, Tammy was still frozen in the same house, with the same struggles being edited like a temper tantrum. That envy, if it existed, didn't start recently. Even in the earlier seasons, you could feel the shift. Amy was getting vertical. Tammy was getting smaller physically, yes, but sharper emotionally. Cracking jokes that weren't jokes, snapping over snack suggestions, brushing off compliments, downplaying Amy's milestones with backhanded comments. Supportive, sometimes defensive. Mostly, and underneath all of it, a sister watching another sister change while feeling like she was being left behind. And it's hard to say that without finger pointing, because maybe Tammy felt abandoned. Maybe Amy got tired of caretaking and stepped back emotionally. Both things can be true. That family dynamic, the hero-victim ping-pong game between them, was a huge piece of what made the show compelling and destructive. Producers watched it happen in real time. When Tammy stopped attending certain scheduled scenes, they initially brushed it off. Maybe bad weather, maybe health issues, maybe a delay. But as it multiplied, it became very clear this wasn't medical. It was personal. Then they placed a call, a neutral chat, some questions about scenes coming up, and Tammy dropped it flat. If Amy's filming, I'm not. Pause. No explanation, no smirk, not even frustration, just fact. From a legal and production standpoint, Tammy's contract doesn't give her the right to dictate cast. But in reality production, you don't force a nuclear sister into scenes she doesn't want to shoot. Not when her moods can turn 12-hour days into storm footage. Not when episodes' entire audiences look forward to hinge on her energy. Amy's reported response stunned more than just the crew. Then we're not sisters. It didn't sound like pain. It sounded like acceptance. Like she'd already been grieving that bond off camera and was now just done saying it out loud. After all, there's nothing more emotionally brutal than realizing someone close to you now sees your presence as a problem to be removed. Suddenly, everything makes more sense in reverse. Why Amy seemed emotionally distant in confessionals. Why her narration segments felt more checked out. Why she stopped calling Tammy my best friend and switched to my sister. It wasn't fatigue. It was foreshadowing. And now TLC has a storm on its hands. They were banking on a joint renewal arc, some hopeful reconciliation, maybe even a family retreat-style reset. Now they've got rival edit timelines and pressure to craft two separate storylines from two sisters, apparently living totally disconnected lives. One team is tasked with following Amy as a single mom trying to regain her balance and independence. The other is trying to capture Tammy starting over post-treatment with no emotional anchor, no supportive partner, and half the country watching her every recovery misstep like a countdown clock. This isn't just about TV, it's about grief. These girls built their identity around being each other's home, and now that house is empty, no slammed door, just lights out. But what if Tammy meant something completely different, and no one saw it coming? Back when they started filming, it was never about fame. Not for Amy, not for Tammy. It was about getting help, getting healthier, and finally having someone listen. They were loud, yes. Messy, always. But underneath all that was a raw, unfiltered bond that made people stop scrolling. Two sisters riding shotgun in each other's disaster, laughing through pain, calling each other out with zero filter, and still going to bed with matching headaches and inside jokes. Whatever else was breaking around them, they had each other. Until they didn't. In the early days, it felt like no matter how rough things got, they were tethered. Not in a cute Instagram sisters way, but in a survival-packed way. Amy helped Tammy shower when she couldn't stand. Tammy helped Amy grocery shop when panic attacks were creeping up. They bickered about pizza toppings, makeup stashes, outdated phone chargers, but they held space for each other in a world that made them feel invisible. For everything else they lacked, money, boundaries, patience, they had loyalty. Messy, complicated, twisted loyalty. But loyalty without limits turns into resentment fast. And for them, the cracks didn't come from one fight. They came slowly, tamely, disguised at first as little eye rolls and snack arguments. But if you paid attention, there were signs almost from season 1 that this wasn't sustainable. Watching Amy support Tammy didn't always come off as pure love. Sometimes it looked like guilt, sometimes control. Like she had to prove to the world she wasn't giving up, even when Tammy made it clear she didn't want carrots, didn't want to walk, didn't want to change. And Tammy, she wasn't stupid. She could feel that shift, that her sister was smiling through clenched teeth, that her progress was always being benchmarked against Amy's hope. which at times probably didn't feel like support. It felt like a spotlight. There's this moment in season 2 where they were arguing over portion sizes. Nothing unusual. But halfway through the back and forth, Tammy turns quiet. And you could almost see it click, that washed-out stare, the clenched jaw. She wasn't mad over calories. She was tired of being managed. And that was the trap. They had slipped into roles. Amy, the fixer, Tammy, the problem, and once those dynamics set in, every little moment bent around them. Fans saw it. Some rooted for Amy to walk away, finally live her own life. Others begged Tammy to wake up, take ownership. But what most people ignored was that both of them were crumbling under expectations neither of them set. As Amy pulled away slowly, marrying, having kids, finding new priorities, it became clear that her world was expanding. Tammy's wasn't. Her circle got smaller, her trust tighter, and every new name Amy added to her contact list felt like one more person she'd have to compete with for Amy's emotional attention. Especially after the birth of Gage. Tammy once said while joking, "She's got a baby now, guess I'm chopped liver." It was edited over with ukulele music like it was just sister banter. But the tone, that hit different. It didn't sound like a joke. It sounded like grief masked in sarcasm. The way people talk when they already know they're being phased out. That shift only intensified with the addition of Glenn, Amy's second child. Suddenly there were 2 car seats. Less time off camera. Less energy to manage Tammy's flares and fits. More missed calls, shorter texts, fewer ride-alongs. And instead of communicating the change, it all turned into microaggressions on camera. Tammy refusing to say congrats. Amy showing up late to family check-ins. Cold stares. Half hugs. Tension that didn't need confessional narration. It was thick enough to cut through the screen. But Tammy wasn't the only one growing bitter. Amy carried her own quiet resentment. Watching her sister keep spiraling while still blaming everyone but herself had to be maddening. Especially for someone drowning in diapers, postpartum mood swings, and the weight of always being Tammy's emotional safety net. That's where the cold shoulders started. Amy used to plead. Then she started sighing. Then she just stopped replying. People who aren't close to production don't realize how long the silences were. How they'd go days between scenes without speaking unless prompted. How even casual crews started eliminating any activities that involved both being in close proximity. It wasn't just awkward. It was mean. Not loud mean, quiet mean. And in that quiet, their bond started molding instead of mending. Side characters didn't help. Chris, their brother, kept trying to play the peacekeeper, but even he got caught in the crossfire. One episode, he tried to organize a walk for all of them. Tammy belayed. Amy rolled her eyes. Chris threw his hands up like a man caught in 2 whirlpools going in opposite directions. And once Amanda and Misty started popping into more episodes, editing turned it into group therapy. Except everyone was traumatized, and nobody was licensed to facilitate real healing. Even family cookouts became passive-aggressive potlucks of tension. Tammy showing up late, or not at all. Amy pretending she didn't care while obviously caring too much, phone in hand, checking on her boys, eyes avoiding her sister the whole time. That's the thing people forget. Fame doesn't just bring money and attention, it brings mirrors, lots of them. Suddenly you're watching yourself argue in HD with subtitles. You see your eye rolls, your tone, your tiredness. And when you've already got lifelong emotional wounds carved in deep, that spotlight doesn't heal. It exposes. What made them strong in the beginning, total codependency mixed with brutal loyalty, is the same thing that made them combustible once cameras amplified every issue. They could rely on each other until they couldn't breathe without resentment. Fame doesn't ruin family, but it accelerates whatever cracks are already there. And for Amy and Tammy, the fame didn't create jealousy, it lit it up in public, for millions to watch, judge, meme, and quote. Amy got praise for holding her life together. Tammy got mocked every time she cracked. And maybe, somewhere in there, Tammy started questioning who was fighting for her and who was fighting about her. Maybe Amy started wondering whether helping was ever help at all or just emotional martyrdom wrapped as responsibility. Neither of them said it out loud during filming, but they didn't have to. You could feel it. And then, something flipped. Because the moment Tammy allegedly stopped responding, not temporarily but fully behind the scenes, communication broke. Amy reached out. Once, then twice. Soft at first. Short replies, then none. And what broke her the most wasn't the silence. It was a screenshot. But the real betrayal came, not on camera, but behind a text. Before Tammy's ultimatum ever hit the headlines, before Amy's name stopped showing up in captions and family photo dumps, there was something off every time the cameras rolled. A stiffness, a delay, like every cast member was silently checking the vibe in the room before even saying hello. The type of tension you don't really catch on the first watch, but it hits different when you go back. Suddenly those funny moments feel forced. The reactions feel edited to cut out what somebody really wanted to say. Because like it or not, the Slaton family isn't just dealing with personal issues. They're also under an enormous amount of production weight. And somewhere between season 3 and now, things shifted. What started as raw, awkward authenticity, a family just trying to document their transformation, turned into a carefully patched reality show with structure, stakes, and drama baked in. And once that switch flipped, it was no longer just reality. It was reality with insurance forms and director's notes. When you're watching 1000 LB Sisters, you're seeing Tammy and Amy. But behind that are at least a dozen people: assistant producers, field directors, drivers, health consultants, scheduling managers. It takes an actual team to tape someone weighing in at a clinic in another city, getting clearance from both the doctor and the facility just to shoot. And with every season, that process got more complicated. Tammy's declining participation added risk. Amy's postpartum boundaries made scheduling trickier. And TLC? They did what networks always do when things start slipping. They doubled down on the drama. There's a theory floating around, not just in Reddit threads or gossip channels, but among people with production knowledge, that once the Slaton storyline started losing weight as a medical narrative, TLC shifted it toward emotional conflict. More cuts between arguments, more emphasis on passive aggression, more soft lighting on serious scenes and sitcom music during funny breakdowns. Like in season 4, the post-rehab family dinner. You probably remember the moment. Tammy comes in late. Amy welcomes her with a smile, but it's tired. The room's stiff. Chris tries to make a toast. Tammy picks at her food. There's a 5-second pause too long to be casual. The editors left it in. Uncomfortable silence. That didn't used to make the cut. Now it's part of the formula. Same goes for how confessionals started being spliced together with reaction shots from different arguments. You'd see Amy giving a thoughtful answer. You'd see Tammy scoffing. But were they reacting to the same scene? Sometimes, yes. Other times it was manufactured tension, created in post. That doesn't mean the drama isn't real. That doesn't mean they're lying. It means the edit is designed to make you feel tension, even when it wasn't explosive in person. And while the network might call it shaping the narrative, for the Slaton sisters, it probably began to feel like being cornered. Amy especially looked more and more uncomfortable in later seasons. Not just physically exhausted, emotionally pulled. There's this one episode where they're doing a group activity. Everybody's painting. The vibe's supposed to be light. But when Tammy makes a side comment about Amy's parenting, something small, half-whispered, Amy doesn't even flinch. She pauses, looks at the camera, looks down, and keeps painting. She didn't fight back. She didn't take the bait. She disengaged. That's not casual family friction. That's someone emotionally tapped out but still contractually obligated to finish the scene. And Tammy, for all her outbursts, there were real moments where she looked visibly cornered. Like the time they surprised her with a family intervention-type check-in. Everyone gathered around, sharing disappointment. Tammy, freshly out of rehab, looked like she didn't know what this was even about. She barely spoke, looked to the floor, gave a one-word answer, then stopped showing up for group scenes that week. These aren't just coincidences. It points to a deeper pressure, not just to participate but to perform struggle. Because TLC doesn't run a wellness show. They run a drama show. And you can only show so many weigh-ins before you have to offer something messier. Something fans screenshot. Something that trends. At some point, Amy and Tammy stopped being people who happened to be filmed. They became characters in a franchise. They had arcs, roles, confessionals had prompts. Shoots got scripts, not lines, but emotional beats to hit. That trickles into how you talk, how you argue, how you pretend not to care during a fight where the cameras are rolling, but everyone's already emotionally bankrupt before lunch. Here's where it gets tricky. Accountability. Because it's easy to point fingers at producers or labels and say they made them act like this. But both sisters signed contracts. They agreed to the setup, accepted the paychecks, took the fame, and said yes again and again, even as things got uglier. Tammy could have walked the moment she felt manipulated. Amy could have paused to protect her peace, but instead they both kept going until it exploded. That said, it's still fair to wonder if they ever really had the freedom to say no. Reality contracts can be ironclad. The fine print often puts network interest above cast comfort. You don't get to take a break from filming because your sister lashed out unless production approves it. You don't get to skip an arc just because you're tired. And when the cameras are on you inside your own house, do you even get to have bad days in peace? What happens when every emotional moment has a label? Good ratings, slow scene, needs pickup. You stop healing and start performing pain. And eventually, you either mentally check out or you blow the whole thing up. Tammy chose option 2. She allegedly told someone in the control team during filming, "They want me to fight with Amy, but I'm not doing it. I'm not a puppet." That wasn't said on air. That wasn't a confessional. That was raw frustration heard by someone wearing a mic pack. And once she vocalized it, production backed off. Temporarily. But word got around quick at TLC headquarters. That line didn't sound like protest. It sounded like warning. It echoed through calls into meeting rooms to execs one level up. Because when your highest conflict star, who brings in views and headlines, turns around and calls the entire dynamic puppeteering, you don't ignore that. You escalate. And then Tammy allegedly said something that TLC couldn't ignore. Long before the cameras caught on, Tammy Slaton started changing. And it wasn't just the weight loss or the upgraded kitchen or the fact that she stopped coloring her hair every other week. It was something deeper, quieter, like her whole nervous system was shifting. Like she'd spent so long being Tammy's shadow, she didn't fully realize she had a whole separate identity until she stepped outside of it. And for Amy, that clarity didn't come from therapy. It came from becoming a mom. Gage was the first big reset. Amy went from rolling her eyes at her sister's tantrums to barely responding at all. Her reactions softened. Her priorities got smaller, quieter. Less about controlling Tammy and more about protecting what she could control. Her own peace, her own house, her own child. You could see it all over her body language. The jokes she used to make during fights, gone. The running back and forth trying to manage everyone's emotions, replaced with silence. She wasn't angrier. She was detaching. People assumed Amy would bounce back after giving birth, back into caretaker mode, back into the role of emotional referee between Tammy and everyone else. But something about those 3 a.m. feedings and diaper blowouts rewired how she saw everything. It stopped being about making Tammy feel supported. It started being about survival, plain and simple. And while Amy was evolving, Tammy stayed stuck. Still the same arguments. Still the same don't tell me what to do energy. Still the same cycle, tantrum, apology, crash, reset. There's this scene, not even one of the most famous, where Amy and Tammy are picking new bedroom paint. Tammy gets annoyed that Amy vetoed a color. Amy doesn't snap or scold. She just zones out, staring past her sister while absent-mindedly scrolling her phone. That's not boredom. That's a woman who's emotionally clocked out, who doesn't have one more ounce of energy to give to a fake argument over something that doesn't actually matter. Motherhood did that. It shrunk her tolerance for loud nonsense. She didn't have time to walk on eggshells with full-blown mom fatigue, filming pressure, postpartum anxiety, and a sister still throwing rage when an appetizer was late. She wasn't being rude. She just literally didn't have the bandwidth, and it showed. Fans started noticing around season 4. Amy stopped over-explaining, stopped narrating every single moment. Her eyes got heavier, her tone calmer, the pace of her sentences slowing down. She was parenting a toddler, filming full-time, and still dealing with the absolutely draining weight of being Tammy's anchor. And by the time Glenn came along, Amy wasn't even in the same emotional orbit anymore. She wasn't looking for approval, connection, or reconciliation. She was looking for space. And nowhere was that more obvious than during family gatherings. Tammy would make a big entrance. Everyone would hold their breath, waiting to see what version of her would show up. Apologetic Tammy, combative Tammy, emotionally checked out Tammy. Amy, she kept her kids close and her answers short. Never rude, not dramatic, but disconnected in a way that felt permanent. Like she'd already decided this wasn't repairable. At least not right now. There was a moment, a blink-and-you-miss-it hallway shot, Amy holding Glenn in one arm, Gage on her hip, walking past Tammy without even making eye contact. No, hey, no smile. She didn't flinch. And Tammy didn't look up either. two sisters in the same frame, side by side, acting like strangers in a doctor's office. That's when you knew. Whatever existed before, the ride or die, the inside jokes, the goofy YouTube chaos, it had eroded into silence. No explosion, just absence. Amy had finally stopped feeling obligated to always be Tammy's support beam. And when you strip away all the sibling dynamics and fame pressure, that part is what hurts the most. Because this wasn't a one-sided story. Tammy had every right to feel abandoned. But Amy had been running this emotional marathon for years with zero applause and full expectation. She held Tammy's hand through oxygen tanks and ER visits. She canceled her own trips and family plans to check on blood sugar and medication. She set her own sanity on fire trying to keep peace in a storm that never ended. By the time she had kids, there were no more candles left to burn. And she shouldn't have needed anyone's permission to finally protect her peace. That kind of soul shift doesn't reverse. And TLC knew this. The tone of Amy's scenes began to change. More introspection, less interaction. The storyline framed her less as a co-lead and more as someone gently exiting the stage. Producers fed in questions like, "Do you still see your relationship the same?" Amy's eyes would dart, pause, then say, "I'm focused on the boys right now." That wasn't a deflection. That was her entire soul speaking. But Tammy didn't see that shift as strength. She saw it as betrayal. When Amy stopped prioritizing the sister bond, Tammy felt dropped, discarded. Like her biggest emotional pillar had walked out without warning. And instead of asking why or showing vulnerability, she did what she always does. She coped by lashing out. She side-eyed Amy in group scenes. She questioned her parenting. She made subtle digs framed as jokes. Tammy's humor, while always sharp, took a turn. Jabs got darker, comments more personal. Everything from Amy's marriage to her postpartum body became fair game. It wasn't just bitterness. It was someone drowning and mad that the only person who ever swam out to get her was finally staying on shore. And that's the thing Tammy never fully understood. Amy didn't run out of love. She ran out of air. The emotional oxygen required to keep Tammy afloat was killing her slowly. And when a baby arrives, when you suddenly become someone's safe place, your survival instincts kick in on a new level. Amy finally realized that playing co-parent to a grown woman wasn't her job anymore. Especially when her own kids needed every scrap of her patience just to get through an average Tuesday. Even in scenes focused on herself, Amy's whole attention span spoke to somebody who didn't want to be there anymore. No drama, no big confrontation, just quiet escape. Home shooter footage of her cuddling Glenn, chasing Gage, or doing laundry with one arm while nursing with the other was real, calming, and also clearly showing that she was being stretched thin. Not just physically, emotionally. She wasn't in sister mode anymore. She was in survival mode, rebuilding an identity post-marriage, post-baby, post-burnout. And while Tammy might call that abandonment, Amy probably calls it growth. But Tammy's reaction proved. Amy's growth wasn't something she could support. The first time Tammy didn't post after a check-in, fans assumed it was spotty Wi-Fi. When she missed the next one, speculation started bubbling. A week went by, then two. And finally it dropped, hospitalized again. Not for drama, not for a camera storyline, but for real, suffocating survival. Breathing tubes, feeding support, total shutdown. And for one of the internet's most watched women, the silence hit louder than any scream ever could. Tammy wasn't new to medical emergencies, but this one was different. It came with weight, literal and metaphorical, full respiratory failure. A split-second call between life and death. A mere 5 minutes in the wrong direction and she wouldn't have made it out. And for the first time since debuting on TLC, Tammy Slaton went fully dark. No selfies, no live rants. No shady TikToks framed with trending audio. Everything just stopped. Because when your body gives out the way hers did, your world shrinks in on itself. It's not about fame anymore. It's not about who's following you or hating on you. It's about waking up, staying up, breathing through the pain, and accepting that the way you've been living has an expiration date. But here's what most people didn't see. The moment she started surviving, the world around her changed. Tammy's internet legacy wasn't built around redemption arcs. It was built on chaos, her comebacks, her burns, her zero-filter rants that everyone either memed or hated. And the moment she went offline, people didn't just worry, they turned on her. Some said she was faking the hospitalization for attention. Others insisted she'd gained all the weight back. TikTok became its own rumor factory. Here's why Tammy's latest rehab is just a cover-up. YouTube thumbnails screamed that she was back on soda. Comment sections exploded with, "She'll never learn. She's wasting resources. This is a joke." They forgot there was a human in that hospital bed. But Tammy saw every single one of those comments the moment she picked her phone back up. There's no buffer on hate when your whole existence gets crowdsourced for content. And while she didn't always respond directly, something inside her cracked. Her posts became colder, filtered, staged. There were fewer glimpses of laughing Tammy with family nearby, few signs of actual connection, just proof of life posts to stop the speculation. The spark wasn't gone, but it wasn't visible either. It's like she slid into recovery in body, but got stuck in isolation emotionally. The version of her that once dominated the screen was still in there, but cautious, defensive, pulled all the way back. Less was said out loud. More was said in the silence. Even when she did get out of care and start posting again, you could tell something had shifted. Not just her body, not just her surroundings, but the vibe. She started disabling comments, removed tags, posted cryptic quotes about inner peace, protecting energy, betrayal. Not full-on clapbacks, just cold walls built higher every time someone poked. Being online for Tammy was never passive. It was her stage, her diary, and her battlefield all at once. And when that online world turned against her, when the very people who built her platform now used it to mock her recovery, something in her switched off. Not the rage. The connection. Tammy started keeping her circle even tighter. Fewer mentions of Amy, no collabs, no inside jokes. Even family posts felt neutral. Polite smiles, safe captions, nothing raw. And ironically, for someone who'd been labeled too much for years, she suddenly became unrecognizable for saying too little. Behind the scenes, producers were scrambling to figure out what this meant for the show. You build a franchise around someone's lowest moments, and when they start pulling away from that identity, your format crumbles. Tammy getting healthier should have been a win. But for reality TV, healing doesn't always sell. Mess does. And Tammy refused to keep selling it. Her post-treatment behavior confused everybody. One second she'd be giggling in a dance video, holding hands with new family members. The next she'd vanish midweek without a trace. There were even insider claims that she skipped scheduled shoots, bilayed on interviews, or gave outright no comment to basic questions during pickups. Not because she was hiding, but because she was emotionally done performing pain. Some say she had survivor's guilt. Others think she just got tired of being turned into a walking cliffhanger. But either way, her avoidance wasn't passive. It was loud. Tammy had always been unpredictable, sure. But now she was something else. Guarded. Foggy. Like her real energy was being rationed out behind closed doors. Like the person fans thought they were entitled to access was now behind 3 locked doors with the blinds drawn, and she'd swallowed the key. Because here's what nobody prepared her for. Surviving meant grieving. Not just the old weight, but the old narrative, the old reaction cycle, the attention that came from chaos. Strip that away, and she was left to rebuild. Not just her body, but her identity. And when a person's been conditioned to keep performing crisis mode just to stay relevant, choosing peace looks like rebellion. Producers tried to be supportive, at least on paper. They restructured filming. They gave her space. Sources say they even toyed with the idea of segmenting the season so Tammy wouldn't carry the heavier emotional beats. But it wasn't enough. She stopped texting back. Meetings started getting rescheduled, then canceled. Entire filming days were lost because she wasn't feeling up to it. Then wardrobe stopped showing up. Hair, crew, until the calls stopped getting a response entirely. And then the unthinkable happened. Tammy allegedly ghosted production. It wasn't filmed. It wasn't scheduled. It wasn't part of any storyline outlined on a whiteboard with sticky notes and episode arcs. It was a real, raw, private moment. Behind closed doors. No lights. No boom mic. No confessionals. But everyone close enough to them says this was the flick that set the final bridge on fire. Tammy was on a call, at least. She thought she was alone. Her tone wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. Not even bitter. That's what made it worse. It was calm. Controlled. Like the words had been waiting in her chest for weeks. Maybe longer. And someone within the production house, one of the behind-the-scenes assistants, heard it all. The hallway was echoey, the door half shut, and Tammy didn't know anyone was standing close enough to catch more than just sound. They caught implications. The person on the other end of the call remains unknown. Some say it was a new producer. Others hint it may have been a close friend not affiliated with the show. But Tammy reportedly said, word for word, "Amy makes me feel small even when I'm doing everything right." It was quiet. No yelling, no name-calling. Just layered pain. And maybe that was the moment where the switch flipped, not just in Tammy, but in the room. Because up until that point, most people assumed Tammy's resentment was temporary. Filming fatigue, medical crankiness, nothing new. But that sentence? That shook the core of what everyone thought the sister dynamic still was. Amy wasn't present when it happened. And when she supposedly heard about it later, secondhand, through a frantic round of texts from crew, her response wasn't theatrical. It was short. "Then tell her to say it to my face." No emoji, no softener. That's the thing people forget. Amy doesn't raise hell when she's really mad. She just shuts a door. Because for her, that moment wasn't betrayal. It was confirmation. Something she'd probably been suspecting for months, maybe years. Go back to episodes before this. Look closely. In so many scenes, Amy instinctively looks at producers between responses. Like she's checking, is this the part where I'm supposed to save the moment again? She'd grown tired. The laughs had less teeth. The comebacks were fewer. Every emotional support move felt forced, like muscle memory that was slowly giving out. And Tammy kept pulling further inward. Less humor. Fewer comments aimed at her sister, unless it was sarcastic. And even then, wrapped in bitterness that carried more weight than any joke should. It was obvious. But fans still wanted to pretend the glue could hold. Some believed the private call was just the breaking point instead of the beginning. That Amy, already overburdened by 2 kids, a collapsing marriage, and emotional burnout, had been waiting for Tammy to speak that sentence out loud. Just once, so she could give herself permission to finally let go. Others say no. That up until that day, Amy was still hopeful. Still praying for Tammy to rise up one last time, recognize the bond they'd protected for so long, and walk back toward her. And that overheard conversation, that shattered the fantasy. Back at the hotel after filming wrapped for the day, crew reportedly sat both of them down, separately. Nowhere public. Neutral rooms. No cameras. Executive-level producers, the kind that get flown in when things are about to collapse. Tammy didn't deny what she said, but she didn't apologize either. Her only reported explanation: "That's how I feel. That's not mean. It's honest." Amy, according to sources close to post-production, didn't say much in that conversation either. Just nodded, asked if she was still needed tomorrow, said, "I'll do the work, but I'm not doing this heartache anymore." That wasn't drama. That was resignation. Professionalism wrapped around pain. Because despite every headline fighting to frame Tammy as the unfiltered villain or Amy as the exhausted angel, it had always been more complicated than that. Both of them had reached their limits. But the difference: Tammy articulated hers from a place of hurt. Amy received it as a dismissal she couldn't argue with anymore. Because there's no fixing a relationship where your best effort still makes someone feel unloved. The team hoped things would smooth over. Weeks went by, no big fights, just exhaustion simmering beneath the surface, but everyone was waiting for the follow-up. A text, a check-in, some kind of peace offering. Instead, Tammy sent a voice memo. And that changed everything. Because voice carries tone in a way text doesn't. And what she said in that message didn't go viral. It didn't leak. It wasn't meant to. But it did get shared with someone in post. And Tammy's voice memo changed everything. And it wasn't meant to be heard. The morning after Tammy's voice memo started circulating behind the scenes, there was a full-blown meeting at TLC's production office. Emergency Zoom, all hands. No fun graphics. No spin. Just cold panic. For the first time since 1000 LB Sisters went from cult hit to network staple, the team didn't know if they had a show anymore. Up until then, tensions had come and gone. Tammy refusing to film wasn't new. Amy being emotionally burned out wasn't surprising. But this hit different. The voice memo wasn't even scandalous. It was honest. Exhausted. It sounded like someone who had checked out, not just from her sister, but from the entire machine. And that's what scared the suits at TLC. Because when one sister refuses to be in the same room and the other won't fake intimacy for a paycheck, what's left to shoot? They weren't filming change anymore. They were filming absence. Something had to give. Fast. Sources close to casting say there were whispers of splitting the sisters into separate projects. One crew for Amy's life as a single mom post-separation. Another for Tammy's continued recovery solo. But the logistics were messy. You lose the dynamic, lose half the emotional range. Tammy without Amy is compelling, but isolating. Amy without Tammy is calming, but flat. Together, they were chaos with chemistry. Separately, you're gambling with pacing. In quiet chat rooms and shadowed back-end calls, executives started using a word nobody dared say out loud in Season 2. Spin-off, backup plans were drafted like fire drills. Could Amanda be pulled in to take a bigger role? Misty. Even non-blood relatives got floated. One internal idea was to bring back prior season cast members who hadn't been seen in years, names that had minimal screen time but left an impression. One crew manager allegedly pitched a Slaton extended universe, sort of a Kentucky Chronicles vibe, but execs weren't convinced. Slapping a new name on scattered chaos didn't solve the core issue. Tammy and Amy were the heart. If one stopped beating, everything else collapsed. So TLC went quiet. No press updates. No official confirmations. They started slowing the promo engine, spacing out social posts, avoiding big teases about upcoming arcs. Anything premature could trigger a total fan revolt or worse, media coverage they couldn't spin. Meanwhile, fan theories started boiling over online. Reddit threads kept saying Tammy had been fired. Twitter rumors claimed Amy was doing her own podcast. TikToks exploded with timelines pulled from Instagram timestamps and eye movement analysis like they were decoding Scandal. Someone swore Amanda was writing a tell-all. Another post insisted the whole conflict was scripted so they could relaunch the series as 1000 LB Sisters, rebuilt. Every theory hit algorithm gold. Every fan with a Wi-Fi signal suddenly had a hot take. But all that chatter was noise muffling the deeper question people weren't asking. Did TLC really not see this coming? Because behind the scenes, producers had been documenting little cracks for a while. Tammy storming off after arguments, Amy canceling last minute, missed call sheets, passive-aggressive texts. Some editors even had to dub over audio when scenes were too icy to salvage. At first, TLC assumed it would cycle out. That time and episodes and contracts would pull them back into orbit. But cracks spread quietly. By the time the voice memo surfaced, claiming Tammy had no space left to fix things, it wasn't repairable. One line, reportedly buried at the end of the memo, went, "I love her, but not like before. Not like she thinks." That's when the panic got real. Because you can edit out arguments. You can even slice tension into drama. But you can't fake love when it's gone. And without that, TLC didn't have a family show. They had strangers under the same banner. Mid-level execs started running back-view audience testing. Clips of the sisters in separate scenes sent to focus groups. Amy buying clothes for her boys alone. Tammy walking through rehab facilities silently. The feedback, "Where's the connection?" "It feels sad," one viewer simply said. "I watch this because they aren't perfect, but I need to believe they still love each other." It was a brutal reality check. So in what felt like damage control, TLC began reapproaching other family members. More time with Chris. Checking Amanda's schedule. Asking Misty about availability. Producers warned cast not to discuss the fallout publicly, at least not until contracts and next step approvals were finalized. But fans don't need spoilers when the vibe changes. They could already tell something massive had shifted. The timelines weren't syncing. The sisters weren't reacting to each other's lives anymore. And it became painfully obvious once fans scrolled too far back on Amy's page. Old highlights that featured her and Tammy. Gone. Family trips, holidays, goofy car rants. Archived or deleted completely. She wasn't making a point. She was wiping the slate quietly, methodically. That's when even longtime followers started asking, "Are they done for real?" And then Amy dropped a photo fans weren't ready to see. The photo was simple. Amy sitting in her backyard, no makeup, hair pulled back, holding both her boys in her lap. The caption, "Peace, finally." No hashtags, no emojis, no trace of Tammy anywhere in the comments, the tags, or the vibe. To fans, it looked like healing. To those watching closely, it looked like grief. And that's when the internet lit up. Reddit exploded. Twitter threads went full analysis mode. Some dissected the lawn furniture. Others zoomed in on the background, claiming the broken wind chime meant something symbolic. But the post wasn't dramatic, it was strategic. It sent a message. Amy was done being the fixer. She had people to love, and they were all in the frame already. Tammy didn't respond publicly, but 10 hours later she reposted an old quote. Sometimes the people who love you the most will also be the reason you forget how to love yourself. Black screen, white text. The kind of thing people scroll past in stories unless you know who it's for, and that's how it started. The coded posts, the emotional ping-pong. An entire family feud playing out quietly on timelines, fenced off behind vague captions and filtered selfies with way too much subtext to ignore. Every image, every like, every untagged photo became gossip gold. Amy's feed leaned soft. Babies, closets, recipes, short videos of the boys stacking blocks while she muttered sweet nothings off camera. But even those had a message. One clip had baby Gage mumbling, "Call mama," while Amy laughed and whispered, "No, not that mama." Was it scripted? No. Was everyone watching it thinking the same thing? Absolutely. Meanwhile, Tammy's posts got sharper. She wasn't naming names, but she was setting fires. One video showed her doing her makeup in silence, that soundbite of "It's Always the Closest Ones" looping in the background. It hit nearly 200,000 views in 48 hours, and not because her contour improved. This was a full-era shift, from sisters in survival mode to women fencing each other off emotionally, but with filters and curated captions. But here's where it gets tricky: which parts were genuine and which were performative. Because we've seen this cycle before. On-screen rants, real tears, off-screen self-promotion. The internet's knee-jerk reaction is to assume everything is either a cry for help or promo for the next season. But for Amy and Tammy, the answer's not that simple. Amy's withdrawal doesn't look dramatic. She doesn't rage quit on camera. She fades, disappears out of photos slowly. Stops laughing at Tammy's one-liners. She's the kind of person who shows you she's done by simply not including you anymore. Tammy, on the other hand, posts like she's sending coded Morse signals to a fandom full of detectives. One day she's quoting family betrayal. The next she's joking about people using her. Then straight into a lip sync about cutting off toxic energy. It's whiplash, but if you know Tammy, it's also typical. What makes it different this time is what's missing: the commentary from each other. They're not clashing directly. They're rewriting each other's presence entirely. And as the social media breadcrumbs kept dropping, fans became the translators, comparing timestamps, captions, song lyrics, screen brightness, trying to clue in on who hurt who and whether there was even a path back. Whole accounts were built just to monitor who deleted what, who liked which post, and whether Amy's new piece was code for permanent separation. Some claimed Amy was better off. Others accused her of abandoning Tammy in her slowest recovery. Few agreed. Everyone guessed. But not many paid attention to the emotional nuance hiding under the captions. Because a lot of Tammy's petty, the pointed quotes, the side-eyed sound bites, wasn't about fame. It was about grief. The kind of grief that lashes out as pride. The kind that says, "I don't care" 100 times just to prove it hurts less. Meanwhile, Amy's peace posts weren't really peaceful. They were layered with goodbye. She wasn't just building a new chapter. She was putting the old one in storage. There's this pattern in their online behavior that tells you everything. The more one pretends to joke, the more the other pulls away. It's like a dance of echoes, one still craving connection, the other stepping farther back with every post. Tammy's humor became her defense. "Everybody leaves, but I'm still that beach. Imagine blaming me when you spent years pity parenting." Jokes, maybe, but jokes built from something sharp underneath. Layered hurt dressed in lipstick and petty playlists. Amy, on the other hand, just changed the narrative without saying much at all. Quiet unfollows, soft captions, photos that fill the frame with everything she's choosing instead. Not everyone noticed at first, but to those who did, it was loud. Because silence can be a scream when you're used to sharing everything. And in that silence, a new reality started setting in. The show that began with messy codependence ended in mute detachment. And nothing captures that shift better than the moment Amy posted birthday balloons, with one missing, and a caption that read, "Guess it didn't show up." Most people assumed it was a cute joke. Lost delivery, still adorable. But the date matched Tammy's birthday. And that sad birthday caption, that wasn't meant for Tammy. Reality TV has a short memory. Walkouts, breakups, shouting matches, most of them resolve by next season with a half-hearted brunch and a tearful apology in front of some off-brand charcuterie board. It's part of the format, the rhythm. Drama builds, hearts break, somebody says they're working on it, and we all reset. But not every feud gets wrapped up in a 44-minute episode. And what's unfolding between Amy and Tammy doesn't feel like your standard seasonal fallout. This isn't one bad fight or too many miscommunications. This is a slow exhale from two people who have been holding their bond together with duct tape for years. And now the tape's not sticking anymore. That's what makes it hard to say whether they're done for good or just finally giving each other the exit ramps they've needed. Reality history says maybe it's not over. There have been other famous sibling breaks that clawed their way back from worse. In fact, reality TV is full of long-lost siblings who eventually mend things in therapy specials aired right before the season finale. Think the Giudice family on Jersey, the Chrisleys. Even the Duggars had reconciliations that seemed impossible on paper. Time, ratings, and contracts have a way of making even the messiest bonds suddenly reversible. But none of those comparisons fully fit the Slatons. Because with Tammy and Amy, their break started long before it got televised. This isn't reality fatigue. It's not a PR clout run. It's emotional erosion. The kind of sadness you only get after loving someone so hard, for so long, that it empties something in you never get back. Even so, therapy rumors started brewing fast after Tammy ghosted production. Internally, there were whispers, some from staff, others allegedly from TLC freelancers, that the network had approached both sisters about joint family counseling. Not the off-camera, private kind. The filmed in a neutral hotel room, let's invite a specialist from another reality show kind. Amy reportedly was open but hesitant. Tammy, not so much. Word is she didn't refuse outright, but said the timing would have to be right, which in production translation means this won't happen soon. Some crew felt optimistic. Others said trying to revive their sisterhood over camera questions and lighting setups would be tone-deaf. Maybe it could lead to progress. Or maybe it would collapse what's left, permanently, with footage to prove it. That's the risk TLC is sitting with now. Because if they push too hard, they lose both. And if they play it soft, the show might dissolve into empty space, a series with no center. And say they do let the split stand. Could they really let the Slatons go? Unlikely. Amy and Tammy, despite everything, are the type of reality stars who burn themselves into viewers' memory. They're raw, flawed, vulnerable in the kind of way you can't fake. Love them or not, people feel invested. Even the ones who comment hate keep watching. That's how you know it's real. These aren't throwaway personalities, they're both brands. But forgiveness for this family, this specific pairing, has never come from sitting down and saying, "I'm sorry." It came in small, unspoken gestures. A car ride offered when no one else could. A shared snack from the pink folding chair. An eye roll exchanged after someone else's dumb comment. Their healing looked like routine, like nothing big happened, which, ironically, may be why nothing ever truly healed. So now that the routine is broken, what does forgiveness look like? Probably not hugs, not tears. It starts in subtle choices. Amy clicking Tammy's name in her contacts again. Tammy not deleting the message. Amy laughing, genuinely, at one of Tammy's jokes instead of humoring her. Tammy sitting quietly through a family dinner without throwing darts under her breath. But those are long-game gestures. And trust, once cracked this badly, doesn't fully seal, even when the cameras are off. Psychologically, nobody processes public betrayal the same as private disappointment. When a relationship ends behind the scenes, you mourn it quietly. When it ends with lights and sound checks, you relive it every time someone tags you. Every clip gets cut again, reshared again, memed again. That pain grows legs. For Amy, it's not only about words that were said, it's about years she feels she spent sacrificing peace to protect chaos. And for Tammy, it's not only about being left behind, but feeling like she was rule-policed, judged, and edited into a caricature of who she was trying to become. All of that doesn't exactly set you up for a neat reunion arc. Because even if they see each other again, at a funeral, a holiday, a filming request, the real question becomes, are they hugging to repair things or hugging so people stop asking? And it's hard to tell which would hurt more. Still, viewers have hope. Not because of what was said, but because of what hasn't been. Neither woman has gone on record officially cutting the other off. No YouTube tell-alls, no family-severing posts, just distance, silence, emotional redirection. It's why fans still cling to glimpses. A shared family member in frame. A suspiciously unarchived post. A liked by that slipped through the scroll. Each one feels like a maybe. And even TLC, for all their planning and production magic, can't perfectly script what happens next. But the last scene of the premiere says something nobody was ready to admit out loud. Tammy's sitting alone on the porch. The sun's going down, every sound in the background is quiet. No music cues, no flashy edits, just wind and stillness. Her hands are in her lap, and for once she's not holding a phone. She's just still. That's the final shot the crew got before wrap. No lines, no jokes. No sister walking into frame. And even with nothing happening, it said everything. Not every show ends with a bang. Some just drift away, unresolved, suspended in a silence heavier than any scream. And that's what makes this so hard to watch. Because it's not just a summer fight or an edit gone wrong. It's two sisters rediscovering who they are when they're not bound to each other by contracts and crisis. That last image of Tammy wasn't staged. She asked the cameras to stop after that take. Not angrily, not passive-aggressively, just quietly. She was done for the day, and maybe more than just the day. And Amy. Her last filmed segment didn't feature Tammy at all. It was a pickup scene at her house, Glenn drooling on her shoulder, Gage off distracting himself with a cartoon, and Amy folding toddler clothes while sipping an energy drink. The producer asked her softly, "Do you think the two of you will ever go back to how it was?" She didn't respond right away. She smiled, kind of sadly, then looked straight past the camera and said, "I don't think we even knew what normal meant back then." What would healing really look like for these two? It probably wouldn't come with a dramatic sit-down or some big therapy reveal. It wouldn't come with a TLC logo floating into a hug or soft background music playing over a cake being shared. If it comes at all, it'll be smaller than that. A text that's not angry. A niece's birthday party where they both show up. A moment where the cameras aren't rolling and someone still reaches out first. For years, their love was filmed through chaos. But love without privacy dries up. Viewers got all the pain in download speeds, bingeable fights, and confessional breakdowns. But real forgiveness, that's never filmed all that well. And maybe that's the point. Because this show, these sisters, it stopped being about wait a long time ago. That was the hook in the beginning, sure. But the real story was codependency, resentment, misplaced grief, yearning, survival, and the kind of loyalty that only siblings with shared trauma understand. It pulled people in because it showed what happens when love and responsibility get tangled up. And when that not frays, you're left with two people trying to untangle themselves without losing each other. Years of filming doesn't just wear you down. It changes how you process everything. The tone in your voice, the way you frame your own emotions, the moments you start withholding because you don't want 2 million strangers dissecting them in the comments by lunchtime. For Tammy, anger was easier to show than abandonment. For Amy, stepping away looked cold, but it may have been the warmest thing she had left to give. And after so many seasons catering to camera cues instead of each other's needs, maybe real normal for them was never on camera in the first place. The fans, they feel the shift too. Not the casual ones who check in after viral clips. The real ones. The ones who saw Amy beg her sister to change. Who watched Tammy cough through oxygen, witnessed both of them cry at impossible doctor visits, and stuck around through every canceled goal and broken promise. Those fans didn't stay for the diet drama. They stayed because they saw two women who wouldn't quit on each other, no matter how impossible it got. But now, they're realizing that love sometimes means letting go. That's what makes this so painful. This wasn't the storyline anyone expected. There was no build-up to a final blowout, no big betrayal edited to violins, just exhaustion and grief, and two sisters who stopped looking at each other in the same way. So will they ever return to normal? The truth is, no one knows. And maybe that's okay. Maybe the season doesn't need resolution this time. Maybe it's enough to not know because that's what real life looks like. Healing doesn't come in a full arc. It comes in awkward silences. It comes when no one's watching, not reshared, not screen-grabbed, not remembered for ratings. It comes one moment at a time. Too small to make viral, too real to be fake. What happened between Amy and Tammy will change this show forever. And maybe that's necessary too. Audiences don't need fake reunions. They need honesty. And for all their chaos, their mess, their dysfunction, these two gave us years of honesty, even when it hurt. So maybe the final takeaway here isn't about sides, or blame, or plotlines. Maybe the real question was never, will they film together again? Maybe it's been, what happens when survival stops being shared? It was never just about filming. It was about whether love that started with survival can keep living in peace. And while producers quietly reshuffle cast ideas and promo deadlines, fans are left wondering if the most explosive moment from this entire show was the silence. All we know for sure is something is ending, but endings are sometimes just intermissions. Somewhere out there, another TLC family's already tiptoeing toward another explosion, another quiet betrayal waiting behind filtered Instagram posts and emoji-laced captions. And it might sound familiar, especially when one camera catches something it wasn't supposed to record, and suddenly, a fan-favorite couple's reunion takes a turn you never saw coming.